Welcome to the module all about protein sources and balancing amino acids. So, consuming enough and balanced protein in your diet is one of the most important aspects of consuming a healthy diet. So, we all know protein is important for building muscle, but it also plays a role in the creation and maintenance of every cell in our bodies. So, protein provides structure to internal organs, manufactures immune cells, forms red blood cells, build bones, muscles, cartilage, and skin, helps with digestion, plays an important role in hormone regulation, helps balance blood sugar, and helps keep us satisfied. If you do not eat enough protein, your body turns to your muscles and breaks them down to supply the rest of your tissues with the amino acids it needs. Protein is made up of amino acids, commonly known as building blocks, because they are attached in long chains. Amino acids and proteins are the building blocks of life. Our body digests dietary protein and breaks it down into individual amino acids, which our bodies then use throughout our body. Essential amino acids cannot be made by the body, so we must get these through the food we consume. We've listed the 9 essential amino acids on the slide here, and great animal proteins that include all essential amino acids are things like muscle meat, organs, seafood, eggs, and milk. So these would be complete proteins. Conditional amino acids are not essential, but that does not mean we don't see benefits by including more of them. So, conditional amino acids are included here on the screen, and they include something you've probably heard of before is glycine, which is high in collagen and gelatin. But these things are high in bone broth, for example, but they are not complete protein sources like meat or eggs or milk. So, it's important to balance amino acids, and in large amounts, things like cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan, so those were part of the essential amino acids, can increase inflammation and suppress thyroid function. In fact, tryptophan is the precursor to serotonin. Now, many vegans will bring up that methionine restriction increases lifespan and improves metabolic function. So, methionine is an amino acid that's high in muscle meat, of course. So, does this mean that we need to stop eating methionine rich muscle meat? No, this is not the case. And this is where glycine comes into play. So, that was the non essential amino acid. So, methionine consumption supplemented with glycine mimics the effects of methionine restriction and improves longevity. So the glycine balances out the methionine, and you're getting all of the amazing nutrients in the muscle meat. So the biggest point to remember here is that we want to consume amino acids in balance, as too much of anything is not good. Thus, we should diversify our protein intake, and that is why we made an entire module on this topic. So, if you think of most standard diets, they are typically high in just muscle meat, like beef tenderloins and chicken breasts. So, collagen and gelatin are a missing piece of standard diets. Collagen has a unique anti inflammatory amino acid profile, primarily consisting of glycine, glutamic acid, proline, and alanine. It is derived from the connective tissues of animals, so either cattle, pigs, or fish. As the most abundant protein in our body, collagen accounts for approximately 30% of our protein mass. It's mostly found in connective tissues like skin, joints, bones, and teeth, and it provides structure, strength, and stability. So, regular consumption of collagen rich sources improves skin, joint, gut, and bone health. So, the most abundant amino acid in collagen, glycine, is considered conditionally essential since our bodies can make it. So, remember, glycine was one of those non essential amino acids. So, our bodies can make it, but not at the levels that we need to thrive. Plus, as we age, our natural collagen production starts to decline and our need for collagen rises. So, gelatin is the cooked form of collagen. So, applying heat to collagen makes it easier for us to digest and assimilate. As in, can you imagine trying to chomp into just a raw tendon from a cow? Collagen and gelatin have a very similar amino acid content, health benefits, and nutrition profile. They just have different cooking applications. So, our ancestors' diets were typically much higher in collagen and gelatin than our modern diets, since they practiced a nose to tail style of eating where they consumed all parts of the animal, including the parts high in gelatin, such as the skin, tendons, and gelatinous cuts of meat. So, gelatin, like I said, is the cooked form of collagen, makes up about 50% of the protein in an animal, but a much smaller percent in the more active tissues, such as the muscles and liver, and things that people are commonly consuming. So, regular consumption of glycine sources is important to balance out the high levels of cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan present in muscle meats and eggs. The amino acids we prioritize may also vary with age, goals, and activity level. So, as we age, our natural collagen production starts to decline, while our need for more collagen rises. So, for someone who is older and isn't very active, they do not need as many growth amino acids and need more of the anti inflammatory amino acids. So, this would be prioritizing more sources of collagen and gelatin like broths and gelatinous cuts as opposed to just muscle meats. Now, for someone who works out and is building muscle, we definitely need both, but it's still all about balance. So, some examples of glycine rich sources of protein include broth, tendons, homemade gummies or marshmallows, collagen powder, and seafood actually has a pretty balanced amino acid profile. Now, there are some other cuts of meat that are naturally balanced in amino acids, and this would be the more gelatinous cuts, so things around the bones or the joints. So we're thinking like shanks, chicken gizzards, oxtail, because that's the tail, so it's a bone. Roast cheeks, ground beef actually has a good amount of glycine because it's a lot of different things ground together. And then chicken and pork skin. Also, consider that the braising liquid is another great source after cooking these cuts low and slow, since some of the collagen and gelatin will leach out into the liquid. And that's why sometimes your braising liquid, after you put it in the fridge, turns more gelatinous and jiggly. So, whole food sources of collagen versus powdered. Whole food sources are, of course, a better option relative to collagen supplements, since the whole food sources contain fat soluble vitamins and minerals as well. But making homemade gummies and marshmallows is always fun for us, so there's no downsides to adding more anti inflammatory amino acids in the form of a powder. Supplementing is warranted in situations where you don't have regular access to broth or gelatinous cuts, or you want to make a healthy treat such as gummies or marshmallows, both of which use gelatin. Collagen powder, in particular, is a great protein boost to add to coffee or smoothies to balance out the rest of the protein in the meal when you're not having broth. It is important to note that collagen is not a complete protein like we mentioned, so it does not contain all of the essential amino acids, so it should not be the only protein source in a meal or snack. Try to eat a balance of muscle meat and collagen rich foods in your meals, or try consuming a naturally balanced meat cut like we discussed a few slides ago. So now let's dive into protein quality. The official way of measuring protein quality is called the Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score, or DIAAS, which takes anti nutrients into account and measures individual amino acid digestibility by analyzing fecal matter at the end of the small intestine. So it sounds pretty like a lengthy process, but it's just helping us better understand the best protein sources for our bodies to actually absorb and assimilate the nutrients and amino acids. So the DIAAS ranges include greater than 100, which equals a high quality protein, greater than 75, but under 100 is good quality, and then less than 75 is considered a low quality protein. So, all animal proteins are of high quality, and most plant proteins are of low to medium quality. The higher score means the amino acids in animal foods survive digestion better than those in plant foods, giving them better bioavailability. Gram for gram, animal proteins mostly have a higher total amount of protein and better amino acid profile. So you can see on the screen here, we've got milk with an incredibly high score. Eggs, beef, and other cuts of meat all have a very high quality DIAAS score. Whereas then we get to the right side of the screen and we're working with lower and lower as we go down. So soybeans, pea protein, beans, tofu, and then almonds, very low quality. So, a note about protein powder. It is not regulated. So, while it can help add protein and essential amino acids, it can be a little bit risky. So in 2018, the Clean Label Project tested 134 protein powder products for more than 130 toxins and found that plant-based products were actually the worst sources, with 75% testing positive for lead. So, other downsides of plant protein powder include they contain high amounts of heavy metals, they have non optimal amino acid profiles, like we just discussed, and a lot of the manufacturing can strip away some of the nutrients provided. So, then we're just left with kind of this low quality powder that's not really giving us anything. And so, just one more comparison here, we have a sirloin steak versus soybeans. And you can see that for 100 grams, we have a similar amount of protein. Obviously, the steak is going to have less fat, and compared to the just roasted soybeans with higher fat. Obviously, the steak has less PUFA, the soybeans are high in PUFA, and then the calories of the soybeans for that amount of protein are so much higher than eating the sirloin steak. And as we saw on a previous slide, so just go back here, the steak is going to offer us a much more bioavailable protein as compared to the medium quality soybean without all of the estrogenic properties. So let's dive into fats in meat. So this is just something else to consider in the types of protein we consume is the fatty acid profile. And fat is not bad, but being mindful of the types and amounts of fat in one's diet is important. It's about food awareness, not food fear. And when we know better, we do better and we eat better. It is a lot more important to hit your daily protein intake than to be afraid of any sort of PUFAs in fat, because that's, of course, what we're referring to when we're going to start talking about the fatty acid profile. But we do want to be mindful of the amount of PUFA we are consuming in fatty protein sources. This is not to say we want to avoid protein sources higher in PUFAs, they should just not be a daily staple. So, this topic is relevant to meat, so beef, poultry, and pork, seafood, and dairy. So, in terms of meat, ruminant meat, so these are things like beef, lamb, and goat meat, and milk, will have the least amount of PUFA in the fat since ruminant animals contain a digestive enzyme that converts most dietary PUFA to saturated fatty acids. As a result of their four chamber, very complex digestive system, the fatty acid profile of ruminant animal meat and milk is hard to modify. So these fats are naturally low in PUFA, roughly around 4 to 5%. Pigs and chickens, however, are monogastric animals, so they are single stomached. So the types of fat in this meat is impacted by the types of fat in their diets, meaning the fatty acids are absorbed directly from the diet and incorporated into tissue fat. So, chickens and pigs are what they eat. Chickens fed soy and other high PUFA ingredients will have higher PUFA levels in their fat. Just an example, conventional chicken is 25% PUFA, and conventional pork is anywhere from 15 to 20% PUFA. This is also true for chicken eggs. So, basically, point being, if you can, try to source corn and soy free eggs and chicken and pork meat when you can, because this is going to reduce that PUFA level in their fat. Or prioritize eating the leaner cuts of chicken and pork so you're just kind of avoiding this altogether. Now, what about seafood? Seafood is jam packed with trace minerals and marine minerals that are less abundant in meat from land animals. So, seafood also contains a very balanced amino acid profile naturally. So, these are all good things to consider. The two concerns with excessive seafood consumption is one, our oceans are unfortunately polluted. So, most seafood will have some level of toxic heavy metals. Two, PUFA levels in fish from cold water, as cold water fish are especially high in omega 3s. So, this is not something to stress about, or it's not a reason to avoid seafood altogether, since they're still a great protein and mineral source, but it's not something to have every day or even every other day or to really prioritize as your main source of nutrients. The best seafood sources to prioritize are largely classified as shellfish. They're usually lower in fat and thus lower in PUFA, and they're jam packed with nutrients, most notably bioavailable copper. So these are things like oysters, mussels, scallops, squid, lobster, shrimp, crayfish, crab, cod, and other white fish. What about phosphorus and iron in meat? So, meat and organs are also high in phosphorus and iron, as we know. Similar to the cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan discussion earlier on in this module, this does not mean we need to avoid meat. We need to consume phosphorus and iron, but it is again about balance. The phosphorus should be balanced by daily and calcium intake. In whole food sources, most of the iron is always balanced by copper. However, there are many strategies to reduce iron absorption from meat, such as having coffee or tea with the meal and regular blood donations. Again, this is not something to fear, it's just something to be aware of so we can start to understand why we do need to balance and vary our protein sources. And just a reminder, we talk about seafood in depth in the seafood section. We go over calcium to phosphorus ratio in the calcium module, and then dealing with iron overload and reducing iron absorption in the iron section. So be sure to circle back and check those out if you haven't yet. And in summary, we want to eat meat. It's some of the most nutrient dense food out there, but we do need to balance it with some source of collagen or gelatin, whether that's broth or gummies or collagen powder. And then also, we need to be balancing the phosphorus in meat. So make sure we are including plenty of calcium sources in our diets.